we thought it would be important to just face up to what the issues are going to, how the issues are going to be framed out of the national conversation with three very capable people to address those issues, and that is, are California and Quebec's climate and energy policies a drag on their region's economic growth? And we wanted a candid conversation. Now, we sort of loaded the conversation. I'll accept that. But we have Mayor Foster here, who is always an iconoclast, to keep us honest. So I want to turn to the chair of the California Air Quality of CARB, Air Resources Board, because she's dealt with this issue over the course of the 10 years of this conference's history, of whether the, quote, aggressive policies of California are a drag on the California economy. Mary Nichols.
Thank you. Is this on? Can you hear me in the back there?
Yep.
Great. Okay. So they can't hear anyway, but it's okay. So let me say, economists have been trying to figure out, since I first started working on air quality issues, which is a long time ago, what the impact of California's air policies is on the California economy. And despite many years of studies and counter studies, we still don't really have a good grip on exactly what the cost and benefits of all of these programs are. We have some evidence about the health benefits of coming closer to achieving air quality standards. We certainly have some evidence about investments, about businesses that have been created, companies that have come to California because of the fact that the air has been cleaned up. But do we have a model that you could plug a regulatory initiative into and say, what is the impact of this on the economy as a whole? We do not. It does not exist. And part of the reason for that, of course, is that we have a complex, large, very diverse economy. And part of it is because of the way we ask the question, which is really a public policy question, which is this good for us on the whole, is not really a question that economics all by itself is capable of answering. So if you look at it from, let's say, the perspective of the oil industry in California, oil prices low, is that good for the oil business? No. Was it caused by regulation? No. The opposite would be the case. Is it good for consumers? It depends. If they take the money that they would have spent filling up their tank and they end up spending it on a movie, that's good for my town, maybe not good for everybody else. This is, I don't mean to put down on the desirability of knowing these facts, but I am questioning how definitive we can be in making these kinds of statements. Obviously, my value system is one that looks at innovation. It looks at California as a place that attracts a particular kind of investment. If I were here trying to attract a new coal-fired power plant to California, I'd be miserable. We've been a complete failure. So I want to push back on the question, David, because it seems to me that our policies, first for air and now for climate change globally, have been addressed to an issue of great importance to our people, to our resources. We have tried to develop the term aggressive. I know I'm reacting to it today because of the particular political environment that we're in at the moment, but I like to think we've been ambitious. I think we've been to some extent idealistic, but mostly I think we've been practical. We've never, tried in any way to do anything that we thought was too risky. And we've continuously consulted with a very wide array of different constituencies in California and now increasingly globally. And California's economy has done very, very well. Now, when Jerry Brown was elected for either his first or his third term, depending on how you look at it, also on the ballot with him was an initiative which was designed to roll back our climate program, which was AB 32, to not allow for the Air Resources Board to take any action to implement any of our programs, including cap and trade, until unemployment reached the level that it had been at the time when that statute was passed, which was 5.5%. And we fought a successful campaign led by Governor Schwarzenegger, Tom Steyer, and others to save that program. And this issue was fought out, in the press and in the campaign. And I remember at the time there was a lot of talk about how 5.5% unemployment was a historic low. It was amazing that we had it at the time that the statute passed, but don't ever expect to see it again. Well, here we are. We are seeing it again. Can I claim credit for that because of my magnificent work implementing the climate program? Why not? Why not? But in all seriousness, I think these are somewhat independent variables, and what we have to do is to try to achieve our goals for whatever reason we have, and to do it in a way that helps the economy. It doesn't hurt the economy. I think we got a lot of anecdotal evidence, which I'm sure people will talk about, that indicates overall our economy has benefited.
Minister Huertel, we've done introductions, by the way, in panels prior to this lunch, so I'm not going into the details of the background, but Minister David Huertel from Quebec, you don't have to be as modest because you have a title that says the Minister of the Environment and the Fight Against Climate Change. So you can be bold and just say it like it is.
Well, thank you. Okay, I can be bold now. But first, if we're going to talk about costs, let's talk about the cost of doing nothing with regards to climate change. You have to juxtapose the very high costs related to healthcare. I know you're in the midst of a big fight about healthcare. We are too in Canada right now for different reasons. But still, when you look at the science, there are direct links between what's happening with climate change and a lot of what's happening with our health. And those are direct costs. And the costs of doing nothing far outweigh any type of costs that have to do with investing in preparing the future. A few weeks ago, we had an entire section of an important highway in Quebec which literally fell into the St. Lawrence River. And that was because of coastal erosion. And the science is clear about that, because there's no more ice in the winter. So the erosion is much stronger, and therefore the pressure on infrastructure along the river is immense. And so, again, a direct link. So if you were going to talk about drags on an economy, let's put the entire piece, all the pieces on the board. Now, again, the numbers just don't add up for people who are saying that cap and trade is a drag on the economy. The Quebec example, and I quoted some of those numbers earlier today, are very clear. Since we linked up with California, we've created in Quebec 160,000 new jobs. For a province of just over 8 million people, that's huge. And from a Canadian perspective, 42% of all the jobs created in Canada last year were created in Quebec. And last December, we hit the lowest unemployment rate in 40 years in Quebec. And we've had cap and trade, and we've linked with California since the beginning of 2014. Plus, the system has allowed us to raise $1.4 billion, which has been entirely reinvested in Quebec's economy, helping companies like there's one I'll single out, a company called eLion, which has developed an entirely electric school bus. Now, this school bus is now on our roads in Quebec, on California roads, actually, because the company's here today at Verde Exchange, but also has sold buses to California and other US cities and jurisdictions. And so this was made possible by investments coming from our cap and trade revenues. And if you look at, again, Canada's example, the 3 provinces that have created the most jobs, the 3 provinces that have the best economic records, are the 3 provinces that have carbon pricing. Ontario, who is setting up cap and trade and joining us in California, and British Columbia, which has a carbon tax. So again, you have another clear example with the economic performance, with the job creation, with the high technology, the development of technology, that this is basically a completely baseless accusation. On top of that, what cap and trade allows us to do is leveraging other investments. Because of what we've done in electrification of transportation, because of the Quebec government's resolve in investing in electric cars, in electric car technology, in rebates, and in developing electric public transit, Quebec's largest pension fund now decided to invest $5.5 billion into an electric train system for Montreal and both the North and the South Shore. So you now have a clear example in economic terms that not only is it a good thing for governments, it's a good thing for the economy, but also it brings in new investments, new partnerships. And now we have companies coming from abroad also that want to work with us on the development of this electric vehicle value chain. And so developing these partnerships, working with California, working with other jurisdictions, it's creating new jobs, new high-paying jobs, new technologies. And the final piece is also university research. Thanks to cap and trade revenues, what we're doing, we've created a consortium that allows us to invest in research projects for our major universities, and again, partnerships with American universities, other Canadian universities, to, again, research not only the impacts, the effects of climate change, but solutions and investing further in technology. So this is a continuous cycle of growth that is being created, and all of that was made possible by the very aggressive policies of California and Quebec.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I want to turn to former Mayor Bob Foster, former chair of CalISO, former president of Southern California Edison, and before that, an energy commissioner, a staffer to the legislature, for a counter position. So, are we killing the goose that laid the golden egg by these aggressive policies?
We're probably cracking the egg. I'm not sure. Anyway, I got to tell you, you're asking a guy with socks like these to be bold. He doesn't have. I mean, the guy's there. You know? and these guys are over here playing Game of War or looking at stuff they don't want nobody to know about.
Bob.
Look at him, completely oblivious.
Bob, have we gone too far?
Look, let me just tell you. First of all, this is it's a false dichotomy. This whole issue about, you're going to sacrifice economic growth for environmental enhancement is crazy. A couple of reasons. First of all, the economy doesn't care what investment you make. It doesn't. The only distinguishing feature is what kind of multiplier effect you have. But if you either invest in a coal plant or a solar plant, it doesn't matter. It's an investment, and you're going to get money, and you're going to get velocity of money. So the whole dichotomy is wrong. What we're trying to do here is to internalize externalities that have never been internalized before. You said it right. You have health effects that are caused by air pollution or greenhouse gas emissions. And those health effects are not borne by the same people that make the investment. They're borne by others. When Long Beach was looking at expanding the port and having a green port policy, we got the same argument. And it was BS then, and it's BS now. And the difference is, so we're going to charge a lower fee to ship a TV through the port, and we're going to experience increased air pollution to do that. So someone in Nebraska, no offense. So someone in Nebraska could have a cheaper television. I mean, it's just crazy. You need to account for all those costs. So that's what we're trying. We're trying to have a sensible environmental policy that takes account of real costs that real people experience. Now, having said that, I do think that we're in danger of being a little complacent and a little arrogant. And I'll make the analogy of this. We just had an election in the United States. Some of you may have heard of it. And it didn't come out the way I want. I'll stipulate that. And people are scratching their head in my party about how this happened. And part of it, the way it happened, was we had an economic policy, a world economic view that basically said, to the extent that we could spread economics, good, healthy economies, vibrant economies around the world, particularly the third world countries, through our trade policies, that in fact we would promote democracy and peace. And I happen to believe that's true. But what we ignored in the process, and we just thought, well, it's kind of the consequences that you have to face, is the impact on real people left behind by some of the things that happened, who were impacted directly in their income and their families on those trade policies. And that's just one example. We ignored that. And I think the corollary in California is the Central Valley in California, which is already paying a high price now for electric service and other services. And this is not to say we should not stop what we're doing, but we have to figure out a way to be able to ameliorate those impacts for low-income people. You saw a chart up here that talked about solar, and I'm on the board of a solar company that benefits from this. We have huge amount of solar. If we're going to make 50%, you're going to have to build, I think, something on the order of 15,000 megawatts of new solar, very likely to make 50. You're actually going to have to overbuild and build 18,000 megawatts because the renewable portfolio standard is measured in kilowatt hours or energy. And every one of these plants, since they're going to be increasingly curtailed during that big lump on the bottom of the duct chart, you're going to curtail those solar plants because you can't have excess energy being pumped into the grid. You're going to curtail them, and you're going to pay for them. So now you're going to have more and more solar facilities running fewer and fewer hours. And that is going to cost a lot of money. Now, there are ways in which you could ameliorate that, but the fact is that's going to be an impact. People along the coast don't have real great high air conditioning bills. As you get inland, it gets much higher. Steve Berberick today told me, I had breakfast with him, he said that his combined, now he has a bigger house, but his combined gas and electric bill for last month was $900. And I can tell you people in Fresno in the summer are paying for small houses $500 and $600. And I hate to say it, but it kind of goes ignored by most policymakers. They're not paying attention to the physics of the system, and they're not paying attention to some of the economic dislocations. And we need to start paying attention to that, or quite frankly, you're going to see the equivalent of people coming to the local city halls or the state capitol buildings with pitchforks and torches. It's going to happen. And you can get the same kind of revolution you saw last November. So I worry about that. I think we need to pay, and none of this is to say we should stop what we're doing. We just need to be more mindful of what the impacts are and help those people who really help them, who are being affected very negatively, particularly economically, by these policies. And we ought to get religion from what we saw in November. And I hope he's winning. Thank you.
Mary, are you neglecting that population?
Actually, the cap and trade program has been the biggest and I think maybe even the only new source of funds over the last 8 years that has been going into low-income communities in California, because by statute, the legislature required that any revenues that the state obtains as a result of this program have to be shared at least 25% with the lowest income communities, the most disadvantaged communities that are also the most impacted by environmental problems, or most burdened by environmental problems. So we have been putting money at really a record rate in the last couple of years since the program actually got up and running into everything from weatherization and rooftop solar programs to assistance with fleet turnover to support for transit, just across the board, things that are linked to helping to make our state more climate proof and that also are reducing carbon. So this has been actually an amazing redistributed effort taking the funds that come from the cap and trade program. This doesn't just happen by accident. It happened because of thoughtful policy. And since that time, of course, many who were not particularly supporters of cap and trade have come to see that as a revenue source, it is actually something that's worth thinking about and deliberately focusing on preparing our state for the future. So this is, I was being perhaps a little bit dismissive before in terms of what we know about the economy, but we know a lot about individual communities and about the regions of our state. And I'm not going to disagree with Bob that our state is not all one. You know, we know that there's great differences in the kinds of jobs that people get, their outlook on life. There's a lot of work that's done by Public Policy Institute and others that assess how people vote. And we know in this election, if it weren't for LA and San Francisco, that the outcome in California would not have been as lopsided as it is either. So he's right that we have to look at the impacts on actual people and the kinds of opportunities that they're going to have and make sure that we're thinking proactively about how we're going to make better lives possible for people. But you know, the sort of simplistic, well, let's just save all the jobs of, say, in coal mining. I know we don't have coal mining in California, but that's the great national example is, you know, if anybody thinks that anyone who works in a coal mine wants their kid to work in a coal mine, they're crazy. You know, all coal miners, given a choice, want their kids to go to college and get, you know, good jobs indoors that, you know, that pay well and don't threaten their life and health every day. So a strong emphasis on the health and opportunities and the education that's available to our people has to be linked with this. You can't just do it one policy at a time.
Before I close with the minister, you wanted to respond?
Yeah,
Bob?
just very quickly. Mary, I agree with you, and I think the program is, Cap and Trade has really made an effort to do that. My only point here would be, what gets left out of this a lot is really lower middle and middle class people. It's not low income's got, there's so many protections and safety nets out there. I'm not saying it's adequate, but certainly they're there. But it's the coal miner, for example, or the guy working in the guy or gal working in the auto plant that's middle class that got hit. And they're the ones that got angry. And I don't think we're paying enough attention to that. That's my only point. We need to do that. It's the right thing to do, for one.
Is there a perspective you could add to that, Minister?
I think it's going to be very important to invest. I think we've invested a lot on policy and on systems, but I think one of our biggest challenges is to talk to regular people about why we're doing this. I think, and we have the same challenge, to make sure that people understand that this is not, some extreme environmentalist scheme to change their way of life. I think we need to talk to people, and that's why, for example, the school bus example is so important. When I go all across Quebec and talk about cap and trade, I don't talk about credit auctions. I talk about an electric school bus, and everybody gets, that yellow school bus, and everybody gets, everybody knows a kid that has asthma. Everybody knows about the impacts of pollution, has seen it, has felt it. I talk about flooding, about coastal erosion, about smog, things that people can relate to. And I think we need to have a better understanding about how we communicate the reasons why we're doing this and how this will give a better quality of life and why there is an urgency to act. I think we've been many times too theoretical, too dogmatic about this, and we haven't really drilled down and explained this in a way that relates to the everyday lives of people. And I think that is one of our main challenges. We're doing that. We're doing it more and more. But I mean, I remember last year we had a year-long fight to adopt legislation, a ZEV mandate. And the first reactions were, okay, we were going to take away people's pickups. And it was like we were gonna get, because you know how important, and I think it's the same in California. I mean, the pickup is sacrosanct, and so it's a way of life, and it's a symbol.
Yeah.
And so it's the same in Quebec. And so we had to be very, very clear about why we were doing this, and that, it was about urban areas, it was about small cars, and talk to people. And I had to go all across Quebec and explain why we were doing this. And that it had nothing to do with, telling some guy that has a small plumbing business, that now he had to give up his pickup and he couldn't go to work anymore. So it's more about talking to people and giving real examples and telling them why this will make their lives better and this will not be a hindrance.
I want to note that outside right now, as you leave, you can catch a press conference by the California PUC about storage, and so there's some people outside doing that, and you might want to catch up to that. But I'd like you to thank our panelists, capture them as they leave the stage, and enjoy the rest of the conference.